Ever notice how the majority of spiritual seekers tend to not have a lot of wealth and money? Are the two incompatible? And if we go for one, does that mean that we have to forgo the other? So today, we're going to take a look at spirituality and manifestation and what blocks us from having both. Check this out. Welcome to the Power of Quiet, the simple way to self-realization. So if you want total control of your mind and more happiness and abundance in your life, then you've come to the right place. So if you're new here, make sure to subscribe. You're going to love what we show you, primarily because it is 100% experiential, meaning you have to believe what we say, just take it for checking, try what we show you, and see the results that you get. And if you're a regular here, you love the work that we do, and it makes a big difference in your life, then let us know. Hit the like button below, and share this video with your friends. Share it with the whole world, and also share your gains in the comments below. We love to hear them. Now, speaking about gains and spirituality, a lot of times it seems to be difficult to have both at the same time. Either we have to go for the spiritual side of things and go for that, or we have to focus on material things. But it's an either-or sort of situation. They just kind of seem to clash. And to highlight this point and how prevalent this is a joke that my teacher, Larry Crane, used to say. And he made this joke specifically about people who practice A Course in Miracles. And what he used to say about these practitioners is that if you took any of them and turned them upside down, held them by their ankles and shook them, you would see no money fall out of their pockets. Even though that course is all about manifesting abundance, and it's all about how you are an unlimited creator, just like God. And the key to creation is love. Now that all sounds very correct. It's what all these other masters tell us, and it all sounds well and good. But the problem with A Course in Miracles is that there's no method involved with it. It's all just a bunch of fluffy, beautiful spiritual writing. And a lot of people, they study it, they enjoy reading these beautiful, glowing words that talk about how powerful we are and how everything is all about love, and it just feels good. But the problem is all of these practitioners, they just read about it, they ingest all this information in their mind, and then they try to rationalize it. They try to figure it out through the mind, which gets them nowhere. And that's why Larry said, if you took any of them, even though they all say the right things, if you shook them upside down, no money would fall out of their pockets. Now, that phenomena isn't just true with people that practice A Course in Miracles. If you look around the majority of spiritual groups and teachings and methodologies, you'll see that this is a common trait across most spiritual seekers, is that they all talk about it, but they can't really demonstrate it. And one of the problems, like I said, is rationalizing it through the mind. And people tend to rationalize this concept of spirituality and wealth on both sides of the coin. You have people that rationalize it in the sense of, well, I'm all about spirituality. I'm not about materialistic things. That's ego stuff, and that's beneath me, right? I'm much higher than worldly possessions. And so they kind of dismiss having abundance and wealth because it's beneath them. And they rationalize it, right? I'm better than that. And you have people on the other side of the coin, and these tend to be more like the law of attraction sort of participants who come from a place of, yes, I'm all powerful, I'm an unlimited being, everything is my mental creation, the whole world is my picture. A lot of us, we've heard these sort of teachings, like from Lester Levenson. He says some of these things. But they too can't demonstrate it because, again, they often rationalize about what it means to be an unlimited being rather than experience it directly. And now, whichever side of the coin that we tend to fall on and we rationalize about and not getting the results that we think that we should get, on both sides of the coin, there's a single block that stands in front of all of us when it comes to demonstrating this all-powerful, all-knowing, all-abundant being that we are supposed to be. And I'll get into that in a moment. Now, to set up what this block is, I want to share a story about a releasing teacher who was quite popular in our group with Larry Crane way back in the day. And his name was Rich Furlanek. And Rich is a really nice guy and a really positive person and a really loving person. And Rich, he became rich before he even got into releasing because he grew a multi-level marketing organization. I think it was through New Skin or, one of these multi-level groups. And so he built a huge downline underneath him and built up a lot of wealth through that. And Rich, he was very much like a T. Harv Eker or a Tony Robbins sort of a person. He was a very good salesman. And he was also sort of a, energetic, rah sort of a guy. And he brought a lot of energy and enthusiasm into the teaching of the method. But he was more of a presenter and a salesperson, more so than he was a releaser. And one of the things that he did do was he came up with this new way of releasing, new way of working on goals that he called Lesterizing. All right, it's a catchy name. It's based on Lester Levenson. He was going to show you how to Lesterize your goals, just like Lester. And the basis of the Lesterizing methodology is it comes down to three key things that Lester talked about in various talks that he made. Number one, it was based on that story that Lester talked about, how he manifested a very specific special edition Cadillac. And he said prior to actually creating that, having it show up in his life, where somebody said, "Hey, Lester, I got this car, I don't need it. Here, take it." In his exact car that he was choosing to have. And he said prior to that, he could see himself driving that car. He could feel it. He could smell it. He could almost even taste it. And it kind of gives us this idea of the importance of visualization. And I mentioned this particular talk of Lester in the last video on whether visualizing is really that important or not. And so if you want to check that out, I'll put a link to that up above. Now, another thing that Lester talked about that Rich pulled into this Lesterizing method, it was a facet of it, is that you shouldn't release just to get high, right? To release, your fear, your frustration, your negativity until you feel good, which a lot of us tend to do. And once we feel good, we tend to stop. And what Lester said is don't release to get high, but get high to release. Because it's when you get to that place where you're nice and light and high that you could really reach down and pull out the deepest garbage. Right? So Rich was applying that teaching to this Lesterizing method. And also a third thing that Lester talked about often is that you should get completely hootless about your goals. And more specifically, one of Lester's most famous quotes is, "Any impossible, no matter how impossible, becomes immediately possible when you're fully released. And you know you're fully released when you just don't give a hoot." Right? So those are the three things that kind of really gel together to create this Lesterizing method. And so Rich presented this as a new way of releasing, and he had this whole way of taking us through it where we visualize having our goal, we could immerse ourselves in the experience, we could feel it, and so on. And this immersion, this diving in and allowing ourselves to feel having it would get us nice and high. It would kind of lift us up, get us into that high place, so now we could release. And release all of our wanting for it, so that we get completely hootless about that goal. And this whole methodology, a lot of people were extremely interested in it because, hey, it was a new way to release. It was a new way to work on goals. So people are excited about it. And for a couple of years, he did specific retreats about Lesterizing on goals. Now, here's the thing. After a couple of years, after a couple of retreats of doing this Lesterizing work, Larry and the rest of us began to notice something. All of a sudden, people stopped coming around. They stopped showing up at retreats. And we're wondering why. What happened to them? And so we would start to reach out to these people. Hey, what's going on? How are you doing? How's your releasing? And the common response that we got back from people is that, oh yeah, I don't need to release anymore. I'm hootless now. Now, a lot of these people, when we press them further, well, what are the results that you got? Have you gotten all your goals? Oh no, but that's okay, because I'm hootless about it. And we realize, wait, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like a master. Right? A master is hootless, but a master can have. And these people are like coming from a place where they've given up, really. And they're saying that they're hootless, that they don't want it anymore. But if they can't demonstrate it, there's just something that's kind of out of whack about the situation. And so we kind of went back and we examined this whole Lesterizing approach, and then we saw there's a big flaw in it. And what was happening was that it was actually getting a lot of people into apathy about their goal. Sure, they released a lot of their desires that were bothering them about not having it, their frustrations and so on, their anger and disapproving of themselves. So they let that go. But then they didn't progress any further beyond that. And what became clear is that there's two ways to be hootless. There's, of course, being hootless about not getting your goal, and that's pretty obvious. But what people weren't looking at is actually getting hootless on the other side of the coin about really sticking yourself out there and deciding, I am having it. And that's where people got stuck. And they just didn't stretch themselves in that direction. They just stayed in this little hootless bubble. And they didn't move from there. And again, it was apathy that was keeping them there. Like, well, why bother? That's really where they were coming from. And once Larry saw this, he took a look at this method of Lesterizing, and there were some good aspects to it for sure. And what he did was he simplified the whole process, right? because it wasn't this big presentation, this big mental thing that originally was the way Rich presented it, but he just made it very direct, and he incorporated both sides to it. And he got us to push ourselves to being hootless on both sides of the coin. Now that's the key. And also what really highlights, right, this flaw in the original methodology is something that Lester talked about in one of his more popular talks about goals, in which he said that our aversions to the world are more stronger, more powerful than our attachments. Because our attachments are obvious. I want this, I want that, I want wealth, I want beauty, I want longevity. All the things that we're seeking to make us happy are obvious to us, right? Our attachments are very obvious. And it's easy to work on those and kind of get hootless about those. But what's not so obvious, and this was what Lester pointed out, is that our aversions are things that we don't want to look at. And those tend to show up as, I can't, I'm not good enough, it's impossible, this will never work. And those are like oftentimes soul-crushing sorts of feelings that we just don't even want to acknowledge, don't want to admit that we have in ourselves. And yet, those are the things that we ignore, and they remain, and they run unconsciously. So while we may say that, oh, I'm all spiritual, and I'm all about being desireless and being hootless, but if I'm still sitting on a bunch of I can'ts, I don't deserve it, I'm not good enough, I'll never do it, I hate myself, and on and on and on, and we ignore that stuff, it remains. And that is where we get stuck. And now to reiterate the point that I made in the last video about visualization, is that you don't need to visualize. All you need to do is just release, release, release. And see, if you release, not only on one side of the coin where you release on the attachments and let that go, so it's okay if you don't have it. But also, if you just bring up, dig, 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 confront those aversions, confront those obstacles, those I can'ts, and just take them for releasing. And once you get those obstacles out of the way, you don't need to visualize anything. What happens is that really unlocks a conviction inside of you. See, the more you release, just through that process of elimination, eliminating the ego, eliminating your mind, you start to see a greater awareness, a higher intelligence that is available to you right now. But usually it's blocked because you're paying more attention to that mind. But once you let that mind go, with all of its visualizations and concepts and rationalizations, you just let it all go. Let that thing go quiet. You get to a place where you have answers for everything in an instant. And the more you release, the more you let go of that mind, and the more quiet you get, what simply shows up is a conviction of, I can. I don't know how, but I can. It's like you know it, and you know that you know it. And it's so palpable. You can taste it. You can feel it. You can smell it. You're completely immersed in it. And it's not a visualization exercise. And this is the point I made in that last video, is that most people get it wrong. They think that Lester visualized in order to manifest the car. But rather, Lester was so released, he could just completely see himself having it effortlessly. And that's what you get when you release. So, that is the key. If you want to get to a place where you can manifest all of your goals by releasing only, you just got to stick with the method. Keep it simple. And dig, dig, dig. That's it. And pull up all your attachments, pull up all your aversions, let them all go. Nice and simple. And if you want clarity and you really want to see how that simplicity works, I invite you to join me for the soon upcoming 6-week Conscious Creation Master Course, where we're going to be working on goals, all in a very direct, very right way, as Lester intends, to get right to the heart of the point. What's stopping you in your own mind, and eliminating that thing directly. And so over the course of 6 weeks, you're going to see a big change in yourself. You're going to see lots of gains show up, proving to yourself that's all you need to do to achieve both the spirituality, the happiness, the clarity, the quietness, the hootlessness, and have nothing stopping you from thinking and having things happen, no matter how great they may seem to be. So you can prove that it is all your picture. So join us for this upcoming course. I'll put a link to it up here and also in the description below this video. Now, let's do a simple releasing exercise to just bring up some resistance, because also resistance is something that we experience when it comes to our aversions. We resist those things about us that aren't good enough. We resist those things that seem impossible. And the more we resist those things and the problems that we have in life, those aversions that we have, that's also what makes them remain. So think about something that is an obstacle for you, or something that you haven't been able to achieve, that you've been resisting. Maybe you've been resisting apathy. You've seen that you have apathy and you don't like it. You've been trying to push away, like, get that away from me. Get it out of here. I don't want that. Now, as Lester pointed out, whatever you resist persists. And that resistance itself is just a feeling. And you can let go of that resistance so you don't have that block in you, creating another barrier for yourself. So measure that resistance on a scale of 0 to 10. 10 being the most resistant and 0 being the least resistant. Just see where you're at. All right, so whatever number you're at, maybe you're at, just like a 2 or 3, or maybe you're at a 10, or maybe you're well beyond that. Maybe you're at a 27. Whatever that number is, just take a look at that resistance and see if you've been saying no to that resistance. Just check. And notice, when you say no to that resistance, does that make the resistance go away? Of course not. So saying no doesn't work. Then let's try something different. So instead of saying no to that resistance, just look right at that number, that 2 or 3 or 10 or 27, whatever it is. Just look right at it now and just say yes to it. Just say yes to that resistance. Simply yes. And could you say yes to that resistance a little bit more? And could you say yes to that resistance a little bit more? And even more. And could you say yes to it even more? And could you say yes to it even more? And some more. And even more. And even more. All right, now measure yourself again and see if that number moved. See if it's different now. See if it dropped. All right, so that's showing you that when you say no to it, it tends to go up. That increases the resistance. But if you just turn that around and say yes to it, it drops. The resistance goes away. Now take a look to see if you've been resisting a particular goal. Either a goal that you've been working on or a goal that you've been dreaming of having. And that resistance might show up in the form of procrastination. Maybe you say you have this goal and you're working on it, but you're really not. You kind of put it off. You're not really doing your releasing on it. That's a sign of resistance. And just measure any resistance that you have towards that goal of yours. Maybe you feel frustrated about it. That's also resistance. So again, on a scale of 0 to 10, just measure, see where you are. And notice if you've been saying no to that resistance. And we tend to do that automatically. We don't like the resistance, so we just say no to it. But the more we say no to it, we're just adding to that negativity. All right, so let's turn that around. Could you say yes to that resistance? And could you say yes to it even more? And some more. And even more. And could you say yes to it even more? And even more. And even more. And could you say yes to it even more? And some more. And even more. And even more. And could you say yes to it a little bit more? All right? Now measure yourself again. See where you are now. And notice if you feel a little bit lighter. And notice if it feels a little bit more like you could have it now. Without that resistance blocking you. Almost like being a wall in between you and that goal. And you see, that shows that you're in charge. Now this is a very simple demonstration of how you can release whatever's blocking you from having all the abundance in the world. And if you want to dive into this more comprehensively, yet keeping it simple, then join us for the upcoming Conscious Creation Master Course. And keep releasing. Keep getting higher and higher and see how high you can get.